Hello and welcome. Today we'll be working on decoding the Waggle dance. And to help out with that, I made this simulation here, which we'll actually be learning how to make in JavaScript in another video. But for now, it's just going to help us with understanding the actual mechanics of how this works and what the bee is trying to communicate to us. So let's get into some background information. Acting altruistically towards an individual is favored by natural selection when the amount the recipient benefits from your actions times how related you are to them is greater than the reproductive cost to yourself. So pretty much what it's saying is that for it to be favorable for you to want to help somebody, you should be closely related to them and you should actually be benefiting them. And that together should be greater than how much it actually costs you to perform those actions. So if it costs a lot to help some stranger and hardly benefits them, you're going to see the cost to yourself is going to be way bigger than the amount that you are benefiting this random stranger. And so this should be pretty intuitive because it's saying that you're more likely to help family, especially close family, over strangers. As biologist John Haldane said, I would gladly give up my life for 2 brothers or 8 cousins. But of course, that has its limits and you wouldn't do anything for even family members. If your brother asked you for a donation of all your money so he could buy some monkey NFTs that will totally go up one day, you wouldn't do that because even though he's so related to you, he's unfortunately your brother, he's going to benefit so little and the cost to you is going to be so great. As a member of Hymenoptera, honeybees are haplodiploid. This means that a laying female can create a male all by herself without fertilization and makes females when she's fertilized. You know how we're made, where our mother passes down half of her genes and our father passes down half of his? The female queen bee can pass down half of hers just by herself and make a male bee all by herself. So this means that male bees don't and actually cannot have fathers. So what this happens is that this results in males being haploid with a total of 16 chromosomes and females being diploid with 32. And how this comes into play here is that female worker bees, of which the hive is mostly composed, are more related to each other as sisters than they would be to their own children. So as you can see here, if a female were to have a daughter or son, she would only be half related to that individual. Versus if she wants to actually help her sister, she's 3/4 related to her sister. So it's much more beneficial for a female bee to actually help out her fellow sisters than to have children of her own. So, keeping Hamilton's rule in mind, this means that a honeybee has more incentive to help its sisters than to have children of her own. And this puts evolutionary pressure on these tiny little creatures when forming a eusocial system to work together efficiently for the good of the hive. A specific instance of this, which we'll be talking about today, is the Waggle dance. If a honeybee is flying around and sees an amazing flower patch, it can come back to the hive and perform this figure 8 dance to communicate to her sisters where to go. Basically, the bee will vibrate excitedly as it crawls in a straight path in a certain direction, which we'll talk about soon. Then it will turn around and get back to its starting position before buzzing forwards in that straight same line again. 3 major factors that play a role in this form of communication are the angle, duration, and rapidity of the dance. The beehive is a vertical surface, so imagine that you see a bee crawling on your wall, on the vertical surface of your wall, and you see it buzzing as it crawls straight up towards your ceiling. That means that if you go outside and look in the direction of the sun, you can be sure that if you continue forwards in that direction, you'll find some good flowers. Based on this image here, imagine the bee is buzzing while crawling around 30 degrees to the right from the vertical, straight up your wall. Again, go outside, face towards the sun, then rotate 30 degrees to the right, then start marching forwards, and you should find a flower patch. The second factor is the duration that it stays in the straight waggle part. This is proportional to the distance you have to go to find the flower that it's talking about. Lastly, how excited the bee looks indicates pretty much how excited the bee is about the foraging patch, aka how good of a foraging patch it is. Again, I just want to remind you that, especially in the example we're talking about here, the bees are crawling around on a vertical surface, so pretty much a wall. So when I say it's crawling up or up towards the vertical, that angle is the bees just starting here and crawling straight up. So if it's crawling 90 degrees to the right from the vertical, it's going in this direction. If it's 90 degrees to the left of the vertical, it's going to crawl to the left on your wall. So just want to keep that in mind moving forwards. Alrighty, I made this little app here just to kind of demonstrate what I'm talking about, to show you in a more dynamic, interactive way, which I'll link in the description, how the angle and time of the day and where the flowers are really relates to the bee, and show a little animation. And if you're a software developer, I will show a tutorial after this of how to make this in Svelte. And if you're not a software developer, I'll link some quick little JavaScript tutorials in the description in case you want to watch those and learn some software development. I highly recommend it. It's actually a lot of fun. So to begin this simulation, I'm going to place a flower. On the left here is the interactive portion of the simulation. Here you have the ability to do two things: place a flower and adjust the time of the day, which adjusts the sun position. So let's keep it around noon, and let's take a look over to the right side of this simulation. As you can see, this is the angle that the bee would dance should there be a flower about 30 degrees from the vertical. And to show that, I'm going to highlight that, and you can see that the angle is the same. So what this is saying is, if you see a bee and you see it on a wall performing this motion in which it vibrates up and to the right at about 30 degrees from the vertical, what you can do now is go outside, look towards the sun, and you will see that 30 degrees to the right, you should find a flower patch. The easiest, and I probably should have started with this, would be if the flower is right towards the sun. You're going to see that this bee is going to do its waggle dance straight up, turn around, and continue to go straight up again. So that just means go towards the sun. And here's where I want to show you that this is dependent on the time of day. And I think this is the part that some might struggle with the most, is that let's say that it doesn't necessarily have to be noon. So right now it's about 7:30 a.m. and the sun is to the left of the beehive, we'll say, from the perspective of this simulation, and the flower is over here. So it's the time that you see the bee dance. Again, you have to look at the sun in the moment that it's doing the bee dance. You can't just look at the bee dance and assume that it'll be just as valid 8 hours later. So in this case, this bee is going up and it's at 7:30 a.m. That means, again, you go towards the sun, always towards the sun when the bee is going straight up. And so it's a similar thing where now if we wait a bit and you see us in the bee do this dance at about 10 a.m. and towards the same flower patch location, if it just happens to find it at a later time during the day, it will perform this dance. So the bee dance is based on two factors. It's based on the position of the flower and the position of the sun. For one position of the flower, you might have multiple bee dances based on just the time the bee happens to be doing this dance, and the seasonality, which all affects the angle of the sun. So looking at this, we can now see the bee. So let's get rid of the angle to make it so that we just have to think a little more about what happens. So if you just focus on the right panel and you see a bee going kind of maybe 20 degrees, 15 degrees from the vertical to the left, that means that when you go outside, you're at your beehive, you're a bee now, you're going to look straight towards the sun. So we're going to see that red angle. You're going to look straight towards the sun, and then you're going to look that same 15, 20 degrees to the left and march forwards. The second factor that I want to talk about is the bee's way of indicating how far the foraging patch is. So if we animate it again, you can see generally the amount of time it takes versus if I put it closer, you can see the bee is going faster. It spends less time. It's about 1 second in this per kilometer away from the hive. So as you see, the closer and closer we make it, it's rapidly going up in the waggle phase and does not spend much time there, versus if it's far away, it spends more time in the waggle phase, indicating that there's a farther distance to go before encountering your foraging patch. And then the last one I want to talk about is when you increase the amount of flowers, kind of how excited the bee is. So you can see that the bee is just going absolutely wild here. It's found the jackpot and wants everybody to know about it. It wants to share with all of its sisters who are 3/4 related to her, versus if it sees this one. And I'll just, versus if it sees just one, and you can see there's less rapidity and anthropomorphically, from our perspective, excitement to its dance.